Rising geopolitical tensions, the impact of AI, the broader macroeconomy, all top of mind for CEOs. That's according to global consulting firm AlixPartners. 41% of executives surveyed in their 2024 disruption survey report instability in interest rates and the inflationary environment to be a threat. We are joined now by their CEO, Simon Freakley. Simon, great to get your perspective. That's a whole big laundry list. It makes our problems look totally different. I mean, like a laundry list of stuff. What's top of mind? What is the thing you hear most from your CEOs?
Well, you know, CEOs thought they were getting a throne. They now found themselves on the hot seat because they've got to deal with multiple disruptions. They have elections coming up, not just in the US, but also now, of course, in France and the UK. Irrespective of the outcome, how are they going to talk to their employees? How are they going to make sure during a stressful time they can communicate a steady message? On top of that, the geopolitical tensions, of course, what it means for supply chain as the Red Sea continues to be disrupted, a continuing war between Russia and Ukraine with the possibility of it spilling over. It's a very stressful time for CEOs. I sometimes joke, Alex, that our disruption index ought to be called the anxiety index because we do see that taking a strain on CEOs.
How do CEOs that maybe operate in China feel about the relationship of the US and China?
Well, I think CEOs generally that I speak to every day are relieved that the toxicity of the dialogue has actually come down a couple of notches. You know, a year ago there was a poisonous dialogue going on, which made it very difficult for business leaders to see a future in China. I think as a result of several very significant business leaders, Jamie Dimon, Elon Musk, Tim Cook going over to China and re-establishing a dialogue, and even now President Xi, of course, reaching out to Joe Biden means that the temperature's come down. I think now corporates can see a future in China, but are still nervous about investment.
Are they nervous about the election, the November election here in the United States?
They certainly are. In our survey every year, 3,200 CEOs, we ask them what's top of mind for them. In the top three concerns is the US election, and not because they're gaming one outcome or another, but how are they going to talk to their constituents, given that it might be a very difficult time in terms of a new administration starting, because 50% of their workforce are not going to be happy. So I think people are worried. How are they going to narrate it? How are they going to talk about it? How can they keep a steady ship through it?
Let's talk about opportunity. We've been talking a lot about AI and the potential promises there. I know we're probably a long way away from a real profitable future for AI, but what are these CEOs telling you about how they're incorporating it? Are they scared of it? Do they see opportunity into it?
So what CEOs I speak to say is, you know, it's now fairly obvious what the efficiency plays are. We all know the stories of how call centers can be reduced by 30% in terms of headcount, radiology reports, etc. What still isn't clear is how AI and generative AI is going to drive growth. And not even the specialists, the Sam Altmans and the Mark Benioffs, have been able to articulate that. So when I'm sitting with CEOs and their teams, probably 70% of their strategy discussions are on what are they going to do about AI, but probably only 4% of their budgets is being spent on it because it's not yet clear. But the best people are doing two things. The best leaders are doing two things. Number one, they're understanding that the winners will be the people that have the best data, not the best large language models. And secondly, they are not getting ahead of investment until it's clear what is the business priority they're serving.
Interesting. So when you say 4% of their budget, how big is that going to get? How big do they anticipate that getting?
Well, I think people are talking now maybe 20%. They see that there's going to be very significant investment in the tools, but the facilities. And of course, the investment won't just be in the large language models, but in the infrastructure and the storage to facilitate the interrogation of the data. So for businesses like Dell, for instance, their best years may still be ahead of them. It's not just NVIDIA, because the infrastructure required to support this investment is going to be huge.
Globally, where do you think CEOs feel the most opportunity to deploy capital?
Well, obviously the major economies continue to be the biggest opportunity, but I think because of the geopolitical disruptions that you referenced a minute ago, I think people are having to be very, very thoughtful about it. You know, how quickly will the Middle East reach resolution, and will supply chains reestablish themselves? How will they think about investing in Europe, which overall has zero growth at the moment? And now with two snap elections and uncertainty as to what happens the other side of those elections, I think it is a very uncertain time for CEOs, but the best CEOs pivot quickly. They don't make themselves a hostage of a strategy that becomes inefficient. They pivot. They do it nearly right, Alex, but they do it now.
But you're describing a very hard job. I mean, the CEO position has always been a hard job, but it's obviously a lot harder now. And we've seen huge turnover in the C-suite. I mean, the CFO turnover is astronomical. We haven't seen anything like this, at least in this most recent economic cycle. And I think the CEO turnover numbers are starting to get up to those levels as well.
Absolutely. So in the S&P 500, 10 years ago, the average tenure was 7.5 years. Now it's 4.6. We're seeing this increasing rate of turnover. I think in May of this year, it's the largest number of CEO replacements in the S&P 500 ever. So it's a stressful job. And it's not that any one thing, Romain, is too difficult. It's just the multiplicity of issues that layer on top of each other that makes it an incredibly stressful job.
All right. Well, this was an incredibly enlightening conversation here. Simon, always great to talk to you.
Great
and the research you guys are doing there over at AlixPartners, really phenomenal. Simon Freakley, the CEO over at AlixPartners.